Good morning, this is Marshall Davis. I have taken several trips to Eastern Mediterranean countries to visit biblical sites. Israel, Turkey, Jordan, Egypt. One year I took a trip to Greece and followed the journeys of the Apostle Paul. But one of my favorite sites was not a biblical. It was Delphi on Mount Parnassus. It was said that the maxim, know thyself, was inscribed upon the temple of Apollo there. So I climbed among the ruins looking for some sign of those words somewhere where they might have been, the words of the Delphic oracle. But I didn't find them anywhere. But I sat down on that mountainside and I imagined people coming to that site to read those words and to ponder what they meant. If I remember correctly, it was said that they were engraved over the entrance. The saying is certainly an entrance to the spiritual life. Today it is called self-inquiry. These words are also the teaching of Jesus, according to the third saying in the Gospel of Thomas. This third saying has two different parts, and it probably should be divided into two sayings, but whichever scholar originally numbered these sayings put them together, and I can see why, so I'll take them together. Let me start by reading the saying in its entirety. Jesus said, "If those who lead you say to you, 'See, the kingdom is in the sky,' then the birds of the sky will precede you. If they say to you, 'It is in the sea,' then the fish will precede you. Rather, the kingdom is inside of you, and it is outside of you. When you come to know yourselves, then you will become known, and you will realize that it is you who are the sons of the living Father. But if you will not know yourselves, you dwell in poverty, and it is you who are that poverty." Marvelous saying. The first part is about where you find the kingdom of God, also known as the kingdom of heaven or the kingdom of the Father in the Gospel of Thomas. Christians talk a lot about heaven, kingdom of heaven. They picture the kingdom of heaven as up there, up somewhere, although when pressed they can't say exactly where. They'll say Jesus physically ascended up there into the sky and on to heaven, and they expect Jesus someday to physically appear in the sky, returning from heaven to establish his kingdom on earth. That's not what Jesus taught, according to the Gospel of Thomas. Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is not up in the sky. It's not in the clouds or above the clouds. He also said it's not in the depths of the sea. In other words, Jesus is saying it's not a place in time and space. He said, rather, the kingdom is within you and it is outside you. That is his way of saying it's everywhere. Now, we are used to the canonical version of the saying, where Jesus says that the kingdom of God is within you. It can alternately be translated in your midst, although usually that is simply added as a footnote to the verse. But here in the Gospel of Thomas, Jesus clearly says the kingdom is within you and it is outside you. In other words, it is omnipresent, just as we think of God as omnipresent, because the kingdom of God, or the kingdom of heaven, is the presence of God, the presence of divine. Then Jesus gets to the part about self-inquiry. He says, rather, the kingdom is inside of you and it is outside of you. When you come to know yourselves, then you will become known and you will realize that it is you who are the sons of the living Father. Jesus is saying that once you know the kingdom of God, then you know yourself. Once you know yourself, then you know God. When you see who you really are, then you know who God really is. When you know God, you are known. As Meister Eckhart said 700 years ago, the eye with which I see God is the same eye with which God sees me. My eye and God's eye is one eye and one sight and one knowledge and one love. Jesus saying that God knows God's self in us. When you come to know yourselves, then you will become known and you will realize that you are the children of the living Father, he says. This is what it means to say that we are made in the image of God. Genesis famously says that we are made in the image and likeness of God. That's in the same way that we look at a person, say that he's a spitting image of his father or spitting image of her mother. Only Jesus is not talking about physical resemblance. He is talking about spiritual resemblance. And the more we inquire into our true nature, who we really are, we realize it's not just a resemblance. It is an identity. Perhaps that's one reason Thomas is called the twin. The twin, which the literal meaning of Thomas is twin. In self-inquiry, we look within and we look without. We look into the mirror of the soul. And we see that our true identity looks a lot like Christ. The eternal Christ, the universal Christ. We are Christ's twin, you could say. The Apostle Paul wrote, "We all with unveiled faces are looking as in a mirror at the glory of the Lord, and are being transformed into the same image from glory to glory." When we see who we really are, then we see who Christ really is. And when we see who Christ really is, then we see who God really is. And we can come at this from the other direction. When we search for God and find God, then we find ourselves. And when we know God, we know ourselves for the first time. T.S. Eliot famously wrote, "We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time." That place is the kingdom of God, which is our home. That's the lesson of the parable of the prodigal son, who traveled to the far country and only found what he was looking for when he came back. And he found himself, his true nature, when he returned home to the Father. Jesus continues in the saying, "But if you will not know yourselves, you dwell in poverty, and it is you who are that poverty." That is the condition of the vast majority of humans, even though they would not admit to that poverty. People don't know who they are. Alan Watts wrote that wonderful little book entitled The Book on the taboo against knowing who you are. People don't know who they are. At an existential level, they feel that lack, even though they may not be able to put it into words. That's why some young people will go off in search of themselves, and middle-aged people will do that. They used to call it a midlife crisis, and older people will go do that, go in search of themselves. They feel poor in spirit, you could say, and that is a blessing. As Jesus said in the Beatitudes, that poverty, once we acknowledge it, is what prompts us to search until we find. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. It's here and now. If we postpone that spiritual search over and over again until it seems like an opportune time, when we have our career and our family and our finances and everything else in place, then we're always going to feel like we are lacking. Organized institutional religion cannot fill that void. The only thing that can fill that void is finding the kingdom of God, which is not far away, not in some far country. No need to travel to a holy land like Israel or India or Tibet. The Holy Land is within us and all around us. If we don't embark upon this spiritual pilgrimage, then we always feel that poverty, and that poverty will consume us. That's all we will be, is that poverty. Jesus says, if you do not know yourselves, then you live in poverty and you are the poverty. Listen again to the saying of Jesus in a slightly different translation. If your leaders say to you, look, the Father's kingdom is in the sky, then the birds of the sky will precede you. If they say to you, it is in the sea, then the fish will precede you. Rather, the Father's kingdom is within you, and it is outside you. When you know yourselves, then you will be known, and you will understand that you are children of the living Father. But if you do not know yourselves, then you live in poverty, and you are the poverty. That is it for today. Grace and peace to you.